came to this one, found the right hand manifold is leaking. So here we are with a brand new one to replace it with. First off, whip the front case off to gain some access. Pop the flap down. Attach the hose onto the drain point, open it with the hose going into a bucket. Something I tend to do is pop the diverter valve out, which helps you drain both circuits inside the boiler, saves there being any residue water left in there. Get some light on the situation. First thing I do is take the siphon out. I unclip it, lean it to one side, and the siphon will drain itself away, so that when you disconnect the black hose and pull it away, it doesn't pour all over the PCB, which is what's happened to me in the past. Every joint I'm going to break, I literally coat in WD-40 to help lube it, because nothing holds as tight as a Worcester Bosch O-ring. So I always try and get as much lube in there as I can. You don't have to take the heat exchanger nut off, but I do, just to give me a little bit extra room. At this point, I take the hose off, shut the drain off, because I've already got enough water out of it. Put some blue roll over the PCB just to protect it. Disconnect the pump, disconnect the pressure gauge. Try and make a bit of access. I've isolated the cold underneath, and I've also isolated the flow and the return. So I crack the nut on the cold inlet to the boiler. Remove that pin. Remove the flow turbine sensor. A little bit more WD-40 in the bypass, because you'll see later on when we come to try and get the right hand manifold out, we want that to spin. Some grips in there to move the retaining pin for the pump housing. Undo the return pipe at the top. Pull the expansion vessel hose out once the WD-40's had time to soak in. This one pops out quite easy. Completely undo the cold supply nut now, pulling it out completely. Flow turbine and adapter comes with it, which doesn't always happen. And get rid of that. Gently pull the pump housing to the left once everything's disconnected, being careful not to drop any water on the PCB. Here we go again with a bit of WD-40. Take the pin out for the bypass. Get a 30mm set spanner on the return nut to loosen that. Can be a bit tight if it hasn't been undone for a while. PZ2 screwdriver to loosen the plate off. And then the PZ2 screwdriver again to undo the retaining screw, which connects the return manifold to the chassis of the boiler. Right, so with all the connections undone on the return manifold, we should be able to just wiggle it out. I've sped this bit up because it can take quite a while just to wiggle it out, but it will come out. The bypass needs to turn slightly towards us, and then the return manifold, if you pull the top over to the left and just wiggle, it will come out. Don't be scared to pull it quite hard, because nothing sticks quite like a Worcester O-ring. So give it a good wiggle and it'll pop off. And then once it's come off, just be careful not to drip any water on the PCB, so there'll still be a little bit in there. I've got a makeshift flathead that just pops the fibre washers off. They can be quite tricky. So that flathead's got like a little hook on it, because I think it was a 4mm flathead that I broke at one point, which works perfectly for that. So I always keep that in my tool bag. Once everything's out, I literally lube up everything that's going to go back. So expansion vessel hose, bypass, PRV cup, the face around the plate heat exchanger washers, the return pipe, and then I actually pull the bypass out. It'd help if I take the pin out. There we go. Then wiggle that out and give that plenty of lube all the way around and give it a good spin, because we want as much movement in that as we can. Plus, after pulling it around, might have interrupted it a little bit, might leak, so it's better to give it some lube, push it back in home, make sure it's in alright. These are just things that I felt, in my experience, work quite well. Bit more lube, pop them in, and then you can push the pin back in on that side, because we know that the return manifold will come out with just the right hand side undone, so it'll go back in the same way. And pop the pin back in. Can be a bit tricky. You want to push the pins through so that the ends actually come out the other side, otherwise they can work themselves loose. Bit more lube. You can never have enough lube in my experience. Right, so now we'll see what comes in the box. You get the return manifold as one complete unit. Comes with the diverter valve motor as well, in case you didn't know that. Comes with all the washers. However, it doesn't come with a PRV, and it doesn't come with a flow adapter, and you're going to need both. So again, lube it all up, every single hole, plenty of lube. Just makes your life easier when you come to put it all back together. It doesn't come with the return nut either, like we can see here. However, you can normally just remove it off the old one, unless you can see there's a problem, in which case then order that as well. It can be quite tricky, so I tend to put it on a flat surface and put my weight on the manifold to push it in, and then pop the clip in. So there's a PRV in a separate bag, which I had to order as well. Comes with one O-ring put on, but you've got to put the other one on. Still to this day, don't quite know why. So again, plenty of lube. And then pop that on. When it comes to putting the pin in, make sure you put it in from the left hand side and don't be an absolute idiot, because some people put it in from the other side, and then when the PRV needs to be replaced in the future, you have to take the whole right hand manifold back out again. Just be a team player and put it in from the left. There's all the washers that come with a return manifold. You get literally everything. So you saw me put a little bit of lube where the plate washers go. That helps hold the washers in place, because the last thing you want is when you put that in, the plate washers fall down, which is highly annoying. So again, in case you hadn't got the gist, a bit more lube. Everything gets lubed up. We're looking at our little goodie bag for all the washers and the screws. So that's the screw that secures it to the chassis of the boiler. There's the flow adapter. So again, doesn't come with the O-rings already put on, which I still don't know why, but we'll just pop those on. It's self-explanatory which ones go where, because they'll only fit one way. Take the silencer and the flow limiter out of the old one, put it in the new one, tighten it up. Again, plenty of lube on that, because if you don't push it in far enough, it's a nightmare to get the pin in at the end. And that's it. That's how much I prep it, ready to go back in. So pop the fibre washers on, then we can put the right hand manifold in. Again, try and do the opposite to what you did to get it out. So the top to the left, hook it onto the bypass, try and push it home, and then as you push it back, twist the bypass round, and then you should find, this one got a bit jammed obviously because I'm filming it. It doesn't always get jammed, but it will hook round, clip in, and then I tend to start the nut and the screw, but not all the way, just so they've actually started. I find that's a little bit easier. Pop the pin in for the bypass, because fingers crossed we won't need to take that out again. Can be a bit tricky when you push it in. Like I said, make sure the ends come out the other side so that you know it's home all right. Just starting the nut off on the return. It all helps keep it in place also. There's the plate screw going in. That pushes the plate home. Just keep an eye out to see if any plate washers do drop out, because there's nothing worse than putting it all back together, fill it up, and it starts spraying out the plate, and you've got to take that all apart. Lube up the flow turbine, inside and outside. There's an arrow on it, so make sure it goes the right way. It wants to be pointing into the boiler. Pop that in, bit more lube. Oh, another O-ring, bit more lube. Then I finish tightening it up now, because it doesn't need to move anymore. Everything that needs to be tightened is already starting to be tightened. Get the return nut tightened up properly. And then insert the pump. You're going to want to line it up slide it to the right, hook the return pipe on at the top, and I normally push that around so that clips on. Push the retaining screw in, well, clip. Pressure gauge can pop back into the board. Expansion vessel hose can pop back in. Again, anything like that with a retaining pin, once you've pushed it in, just give it a little tug just to make sure it's sat in properly. Last thing you want to do is get hit in the face with 2 bar of pressure. Right, now we're going to insert the cold inlet pipe. You'll see what I mean now about putting plenty of lube on it. If you haven't put plenty of lube on that, you're going to struggle to push that in enough into the flow turbine for the pin to sit in. But this one pops in. The pin can be quite tricky, so I angle it to the right and put it in at an angle. And then once it's lined up, I tend to get some grips on it just to push it home. Because again, you want it seated all the way in. So you definitely don't want that popping out. Plug the flow turbine adapter in. Sometimes if you forget to do that and then you run the hot tap afterwards, you're like, why isn't the boiler firing? Then you'll soon remember, oh yeah, better check I plugged that in. Screw that back on. Don't want a heat exchanger walking off. There we go. Ironically, I check all that, but you're probably thinking you didn't tighten the cold inlet hose up, the nut, which I left this in because, you know, accidents do happen. I'm only human. No PCBs were injured in the making of this video, luckily. So just dry it off with a bit of blue roll, get my 24mm spanner on, tighten it up, and then top the pressure up. Almost a tidy job if we didn't have that little flood at the end. Hope this helps.